Hi, everyone, and welcome along to the Ergonomically Speaking podcast, the podcast that aims to help you reduce and even eliminate work related discomfort. I am your host, Neve Pentney of Boyne Ergonomics. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope that you're able to take away some useful practical advice from this podcast to help you reduce your own risk of discomfort at the workplace or help manage the risks among the people that you might be responsible for. So, now that we know why we're here, let's get started. Hello, and welcome along to another episode of the Ergonomically Speaking podcast with myself, Neve Pentney. In this episode, I'm going to slightly revisit an episode that I have done in the past, where I had a look at Zoom fatigue, the phenomenon of Zoom fatigue, and what you can do to try and kind of help reduce the exhausting side effect of excessive virtual meetings. And this is something that is cropping up again and again as I do my own virtual DSE assessments with people. So it is an area that I'm going to have a look at again, but maybe just not focus so much only on the Zoom fatigue aspect, but the other negative impacts of excessive virtual meetings and what employers can do to help their employees and what employees can do to help themselves. Um, Virtual meetings have not gone away and will now never go away, I don't think. They've become an integral part of how most of us work, myself included. But what I will say is I myself notice a difference in how I feel at the end of the day when I have been doing in-person DSE assessments compared to a day of virtual DSE assessments. Even though when I'm doing the in-person assessments, I will usually do more generally than I would do in a day of virtual assessments. And I haven't traveled when I'm doing the virtual assessments. I'm doing them from my home. But I definitely find come the end of the day of the virtuals, I am more worn out than I am with a day of in-person assessments. And there's many reasons for that. So what I'm going to do in this episode is I'm going to identify for you some potential negative impacts of a high level of virtual meetings. And as I said, the steps that employers and employees can take to reduce the risks and foster the health and wellness and productivity in this new remote and hybrid workplace. So firstly, let's have a look at what are some of the negative impacts of virtual meetings and just see as we're going through this, does any of it sound familiar? Is any of it kind of ringing bells or something you've experienced yourself? And I will say definitely that when I'm doing DSE assessments with people, the use of Teams and Zoom and all these other platforms has been cited by most employees as the main reason that they spend prolonged periods at their desk. Back to back meetings, pressure to be visible on screen, lunchtime meetings that are snuck in, lack of breaks in meetings have all been cited as kind of negatives in it. But what is the impact of this? So the first one is the phenomenon that I suppose I originally touched on, which is Zoom fatigue and cognitive overload. So Zoom fatigue, it's just a term used to describe the exhaustion that's associated participating in virtual meetings. And I suppose the reason that we can feel so exhausted at the end of a day with a lot of meetings or at the end of a particularly long meeting or training is firstly, there's an increased cognitive load. Video calls require more focus, more concentration than in person meetings because you need to interpret non-verbal cues, you need to try and monitor multiple video feeds, and then you're trying to monitor and manage technological issues that crop up. Um, And also you might be, well, I'll tip on it later, but you might also be doing a little bit of multitasking as well. So you're kind of you're in the virtual meeting, but you might also be doing a little bit of work on the side too. So virtual meetings generally are associated with an increased cognitive load, which is going to make you feel tired. Another reason that's cited is excessive eye contact. So prolonged virtual meetings basically force you to maintain constant eye contact, which feels a little bit more intense and a little bit unnatural as opposed to how we interact face to face. And people can also be very self conscious. So when you're in a virtual meeting, you're pretty much looking at yourself on camera all the time, which is not something that would be very usual for us and not something we'd ever really do. Like, unless you're walking by a window pre COVID, unless you're kind of walking by a window or checking yourself out in the mirror, we wouldn't really see ourselves a whole lot. Maybe with the odd video call or Skype calls pre COVID, but we're not used to this. And it can make people incredibly self conscious, leading to this kind of heightened self awareness, an increase in anxiety, and that can contribute to stress and fatigue. And the last one that contributes to the so called Zoom fatigue, which I did touch on, is the lack of the non-verbal cues. So if you are talking to somebody face to face, if you're in an in person meeting, it's relatively easy and nearly subconscious that we're checking out people's body language and physical presence. And, you can pick up these non-verbal cues. But this is lost in virtual meetings, or it takes more effort to do it. And this can cause, as well as fatigue, misinterpretations, or maybe communication might not be as effective. So you might not be getting points across. It might be a little bit more labored. So those are the factors that contribute to the first kind of negative side effect of virtual meetings, which is your Zoom fatigue. The second negative impact is your physical strain. So, like I said, the rise in virtual meetings is usually cited, to me anyway, as the reason why a lot of people spend prolonged periods at their desk. Now, if you're staring at the screens for extended periods, whether it's in a meeting or whether it's doing work, this can lead to eye strain, physical symptoms like dry eyes, blurred vision, headaches, and it can also contribute to poor posture and musculoskeletal issues. So if you're sitting at a desk or even standing at a desk for prolonged periods, your muscles are going to get tired. So that's going to kind of have a negative impact on your posture. You're going to start to slump. You're going to start to slouch. You're going to start to slide forward in your seat. And doing this for prolonged periods is going to cause pain in your back, your neck, your shoulders. Another one I see a lot is people who have screens and they're set up really well. They got the keyboard, they got the mouse, but they're using the laptop for the calls. And the laptop's flat on the table. Now, if the laptop's flat on the table and you're using it for your call, the screen you're looking at and the camera you're looking into are going to be below your eye line. So you're going to be looking down a lot. So this can also contribute to the physical strain aspect. The next negative impact that has been found is decreased productivity and burnout. So if you think firstly of meeting overload. So the remote working environment obviously has led to an increase in the number of meetings, which has kind of resulted in this kind of meeting culture. And if you've ever seen the memes or seen the pens or anything where it says this meeting could have been an email. So people are a lot quicker to call meetings over things that would be done by email or traditionally might have been done in person while making a cup of coffee, kind of informal catch ups and informal exchanges of ideas that would have happened, water cooler in the kitchen, that kind of thing. So you have a rise in these meetings, this meeting culture, and then employees are compelled, they feel they have to attend these unnecessary meetings, which is actually leaving people less time to do their more focused work and their other tasks. And this is something that is cited to me a lot, that there's so many meetings that I can't get my work done. So that can result in decreased productivity and burnout if people are putting in longer hours to try and do their actual work tasks because they can't get them done because there's so many meetings. Another aspect is multitasking. So you know yourself, and we've all done it. During a virtual meeting, most people are multitasking, I assume, checking the emails, browsing the internet, checking messages, checking their phone. So this can also reduce the effectiveness of the meetings, can lead to cognitive fatigue, can lead to miscommunications, misunderstandings, and that then, of course, can decrease productivity and contribute to burnout. And the last one kind of feeds into these where your work-life balance issues. So you can have a blurred boundary between your work and your home time with meetings. And I see this a lot with people who work with teams in other countries across different time zones. So on paper, officially, their hours might be 9 to 5, But if they're dealing with the US, for example, the evening time is when a lot of their meetings will be. So I have spoken to a lot of people who have to log into meetings outside of their technical work hours, and that leads to issues with work-life balance, as well as I said, people putting in longer hours just trying to do their basic tasks that they don't have time to do during the day. The next negative impact are the social and psychological effects. So isolation and loneliness is one area here. So your virtual meetings, as great as they are for being able to check in with people when you're remote, they don't necessarily fully replace the face-to-face social interaction. It's not the same. Um, and I know that, for example, I'm part of a female business network. And when I joined, I literally joined, I think, about the week before COVID started. So I made one in-person event and then everything went to Zoom, which was lovely. Don't get me wrong. It was nice to have the connection at the time. But it was so much better when we got back to in person. Like there is just no substitute for face-to-face interactions for a lot of people. And another side effect or another issue is anxiety and stress. So some people can get really anxious around communicating via virtual meetings because, firstly, if they're not accustomed to technology or if they feel like they're on display, if they're self conscious, the lack of verbal cues can make it hard to read people. So I find this particularly among people who would be considered as neurodivergent. They can generally struggle with virtual meetings. The lack of direction, the lack of an agenda, missed cues, um, misunderstandings of tone, that kind of thing can really, really have an impact. Um, and the feeling like they're being put on the spot if being asked a question. So that can contribute to the psychological and social effects associated with a high level of virtual meetings. And then we've got our technological challenges, and we've all faced these. So, like poor internet, lag, audio-visual glitches, mean you might have to try and troubleshoot and try and fix a problem really, really quickly. You feel under pressure. You need to be in the meeting. You might have to be, if you're presenting, it's even worse. You might not want to be late into the meeting. I know for me, one big issue I'm having at the moment is the headset that I use. It connects via Bluetooth and it connects via wireless dongle. But lately, it's just been flipping between connections and disconnecting. So I've actually sometimes just get frustrated and go back to my old school traditional wired little headphones, and they work just fine. But it's not nice if you're trying to present, or if you're trying to, in my case, do an assessment, or you're trying to get into a meeting and you start experiencing technical issues. It's so annoying and frustrating. And accessibility concerns. So not all employees have access to high quality equipment, reliable internet, or even environments that are helpful for virtual meetings, like quiet, private spaces. And that can create kind of inequalities and accessibility issues. The next negative impact that can be found is on reduced team cohesion and collaboration. And I know from talking to people anecdotally, this was huge during COVID. And I know companies tried so hard when onboarding new employees during COVID to make them feel part of the team and to try and develop that cohesiveness, but it's very, very difficult sometimes. So that lack of informal communication, that is so important, especially as a new person in an office. If you're trying to join a team and you're trying to figure out the lay of the land, for want of a better phrase, those little informal communications are so, so helpful in trying to understand your teammates, what they're like, um, and how to interact with them effectively. So, in a normal office setting, like I said, it plays a massive role in team bonding, collaboration, and innovation. But virtual meetings lack that. It's not spontaneous. It's very structured, very, very planned, and very controlled. And reduced emotional connection goes hand in hand with that. It's hard to develop a sense of camaraderie or a sense of trust even among members. Sorry, I think when you're haven't met them face to face, when you've not kind of hung out, had the chats, caught up with what you're doing the weekend, and had those spontaneous interactions, and that can play with team dynamics a little bit and morale. One area I have found, the last area I'm going to touch on, is the impact on learning and development. So I do a lot of training. So I have done training in person, and I've given training sessions in person and virtually, and I have attended training in person and virtually. Definitely with the virtuals, I find reduced engagement. So that kind of virtual environment, if you're teaching a course online, it just makes it harder to engage people and harder to get them to actively participate and engage. So I would be concerned about what knowledge they're retaining and if they're actually understanding. I find it sometimes very, very difficult, much easier in person. And then there's challenges in onboarding new employees. Virtual onboarding is less effective generally at just helping employees find their way in the company, acclimate to your systems and build relationships with colleagues. So those are a few of the negative impacts of excessive virtual meetings. So what can you do if you are listening to this and you're an employer or you're a manager in charge of this kind of thing? What can you do? Firstly, what we want to do, what every company should now have, I would hope, is a virtual meeting policy. And what I mean is these few things. Make sure there's breaks. If there is a meeting that is due to be over 60 minutes, there should be a comfort break in it. And it should be long enough that people can get up, leave the desk for a few minutes, take a bathroom break, go get a drink, stretch the legs, and come back. Another thing you can do is reduce the length of your video meetings. I know a few companies do this. So a 30-minute meeting becomes a 25-minute meeting. 60-minute meetings become 50-minute meetings to allow that little window, particularly if there are back-to-back meetings. That little window is really, really helpful. Set clear agendas. Make sure your meetings have agendas. So everybody knows what the purpose of the meeting is, what you want the outcomes to be, and who is assigned to what different part of the meeting, if any. This can just help meetings become more productive, keep them within the time frame, but also really help ease that anxiety and stress that some people experience around virtual meetings. Another thing is to allow employees to turn off their cameras once the meeting has started. I know we all like to see each other's faces, but employees should know that it is okay to turn their cameras on or off if they want to. Even if they start with it on, turn it off to take a little movement break and come back. And consider introducing virtual meeting free days. And again, I know companies now that there's no longer any Teams meetings on a Friday, for example. It just gives people a day off from them. Another thing you could look at if you're an employer or a team leader is actually cut the volume, reduce the amount of virtual meetings. Aim to have, if you're hybrid working, aim to have the team members on site same day and arrange kind of regular or essential meetings to be done in person on those office based days. And I do know a lot of companies have brought this in, and when I speak to their employees, they might go into the office 2 days a week and they call them their meeting days. They go in, they collaborate, they meet with their team, and then they spend the 3 days at home working on whatever was decided at those meetings. And they find that really, really useful. Providing employees with a wireless headset, I think, is brilliant. It lets employees stay present in, contribute to the meeting, but lets them move from the desk. And it also makes sure you have a bit of privacy around discussions and reduces background noise. But for me, the biggest thing is that freedom of movement, because that's incredibly important. Reduce the amount of camera based calls. So if it can be an audio call, let it be an audio call. If employees can log on their phone or portable tablets, something like that, to encourage mobilities. And feeding into this, when the weather's decent, bring in the idea of the walking or the outdoor meetings. Employees can log in through their phones, pop the phone in the pocket, and be out walking while they're in these audio only meetings. Can be so, so useful. In the office, because let's be honest, virtual meetings don't just happen when you're at home, they do happen a lot in the office too. Provide small meeting rooms or little breakout rooms in the office just to give people somewhere else to go away from their desk during a virtual meeting if they want to. And definitely consider investing in sit stand workstations. These have really, really come into their own in the last few years, just with the rise of virtual meetings and the time that people are spending at their desk. Standing for meetings, I find is great. I use it all the time. Um, I find that I'm not statically standing during a meeting. I shuffle side to side. I might change the height of my desk. Even though I'm on the screen, I'm a little bit more mobile than I would be if I were doing other tasks standing. So I find the sit stand desks brilliant for virtual meetings. And importantly, the last thing you can do as the employer, as the team leader, is lead by example. If participants in a meeting see the leaders or the managers moving around, turning on and off their cameras, that kind of thing, they'll follow. They will view it as an acceptable thing to do. So lead by example. And if you're the employee looking to see what you can do, here's a few things. And you can apply this to virtual courses, meetings, conference calls, webinars, all this kind of thing. It's all about increasing mobility from the desk because the meeting's going to happen, going to have to be there if it's on. So what can we do? Invest in a wireless headset. If your employer does not provide one for you, invest in one. Your body will thank you. Even gaming headsets will do. It's such a useful tool for increasing mobility. Log into calls from your mobile phone. If you're not the presenter, if you're an attendee, and you don't 100% have to be on camera or all of the time even, get yourself a little phone stand, log into the call from your mobile phone, start off on camera, and then move around as you need to. If you have a height adjustable desk or even just a higher surface that you could put your laptop on, stand for some of your meetings and turn the camera off every now and then. Don't be afraid to turn it off for 30 seconds, 2 minutes to move around, especially if you're not presenting. If you're in a private work area, you might be required to be visible on screen. Take your calls on speaker, have a wireless headset, turn the camera off for 2 minutes, walk around, stretch, sit down, and when you're ready, come back and turn the camera back on. You don't have to be gone for the whole call, just enough to allow you a little bit of movement. The virtual meetings are here to stay. They're not going anywhere. They are now ingrained in how we work. And they are really useful, but the negative impact can be avoided with some careful planning, good policy creation, implementation, and by fostering a workplace that recognises the importance of movement and mobility. That's the area of virtual meetings. And as I said, I just thought I'd redo it because it comes up again and again and again when I discuss with people why, firstly, if they spend prolonged periods at the desk, and I'll be honest, the answer is 98% of the time yes. And then when we go into the why, Teams or Zooms, always the answer because we have to be here. I have to be on screen. I have to be at my desk. So we need to allow people to move from the desks during meetings and have a look at, are all the meetings needed? Are they all essential? Can they be emails? Can they be messages? Is there another way? Can it wait till we're all in the office in person? Look at ways to reduce the number of meetings, the duration of the meetings. And one other thing I'm going to say that's really, and a lot of people don't realize you can do this, but it's so, so helpful. Because of the multitasking, the kind of lack of verbal cues or non-verbal cues, and sometimes the distractions and technological issues, things can be missed during a virtual meeting. So a task might be assigned to somebody and they might miss it for any number of reasons. To ensure that there is clarity at the end of a meeting, the person hosting the meeting or the person who's taking minutes, whatever it may be, at the end of the meeting, summarize your points, summarize your tasks, who they've been assigned to, the when, the where, etc. Very important. The other thing you can also do is you can transcribe your calls, your virtual calls. so that at the end of a meeting, there is a transcription of what was said. So it's on paper. What was said, what was agreed, to who, when, and where. These are things most people don't think to do. Most people will blast through a meeting and try and get it over with and leave it at that. And a lot of people don't realize you can transcribe your meeting. So as long as everyone's okay with it and consents to it, if it is an important meeting where decisions will be made and tasks will be assigned, summarize your meeting at the end, summarize your actions, and have it transcribed. Last thing I'll say on it. As always, I will put my social media details in the show notes. If anybody has anything that they want me to cover, please reach out. I'm always open to suggestions. And until next time, everybody, stay well.